Yo, what's up guys? So this week we're gonna talk about do-it-all kites. Who should be using one, who shouldn't be using one, and all the things that you can expect if you go for a do-it-all kite or if you opt for something a little more specialized. So I think this is gonna be an interesting one, maybe even a debatable one. So I think this might be an interesting topic. Let's just get right into this one. All right, so kind of an interesting thing, but I've been kiteboarding for, I don't know, right around a decade, a little over a decade now, and I have seen the industry shift pretty monumentally from having like a vast range of kites that kind of focused on one discipline each to, we live in an interesting time where almost every kite is actually a do-it-all kite. Very strangely, almost all wave kites are kind of do-it-all kites. Most freestyle kites with bridles are kind of do-it-all kites. So what this comes down to is, if you're a brand new rider, there's a good chance you don't know what discipline, what aspects of kiteboarding, maybe you do, but likely you don't know what aspects of kiteboarding appeal to you or what you want to focus on. So it goes without saying, you should go for a do-it-all kite. And when I say do-it-all kite, every brand has their go-to do-it-all kite. North has the Reach, Duotone has the Evo, Cabrina has like the Moto, and so on. When this gets a little more complicated is when you're a more experienced rider. I see many riders who've been riding for 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years who are still going for the do-it-all kites. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, because modern day do-it-all kites actually do things pretty exceptionally well. They're really good, they're well-rounded, they tackle most things pretty well. But I've talked about this before, you're still opting for a jack of all trades, master of none. So my whole point here is almost all kites are do-it-all kites at this point. So if you have a specialty that you like, a certain discipline that really excites you and amps you up on riding, you would be amazed at how significantly better the performance is when you go from an all-around kite to a slightly specialized, but truth be told, still kind of do-it-all kite. If you really want to take things to another level and have more fun on the water, and let's say you have a particular favorite discipline. So for example, you live on the ocean, there's no flat water for miles, it's always waves, and you really like surfing, you really like kite surfing, but you love big air, you love loops, you love freestyle, you love it all, whatever. If you go for a wave specific kite, shockingly, those kites are actually incredibly fun for old school tricks, which I would argue is probably the most popular category on the beach right now. Dark slides, back roll kite loops, front rolls with a grab, with a down loop, all those little aspects, all those things, wave kites do exceptionally well. And in truth, there's not very many wave specific kites left. I would argue that almost every brand, their wave kite is a do-it-all kite that's slightly catered to the waves. So whether it has better drift, maybe they have some bridle settings where you can switch it where it performs better in different onshore, sideshore conditions, things like that. But truth be told, true wave kites are almost a thing of the past. And the same could be said for freestyle kites. So again, if you're that rider who is interested in freestyle tricks, you want to get a little more advanced, maybe you want to do big loops, there's this really interesting category where we have the crossover kites that I talk about all the time, because these kites are aimed at more experienced riders. So if you want to do big kite loops with tons of power, ride more aggressively, maybe you want to unhook from your kite sometimes and do some freestyle tricks and things like that, these kites are still technically do-it-all kites. In fact, these kites often get chosen as the prime choice for big air kiters in competition because they loop well, they lend themselves to the more advanced rider who wants to do big air, and then dialing it right back to that rider who wants to do old school tricks. They might not have the range, they might be a little more difficult to use, but ultimately they're still do-it-all kites. Conversely, if you were a freestyler who was all in 90% of the time that you wanted to unhook, if you went for like a sea kite, for example, a modern sea kite, those are unmatched for that one discipline. They're still okay at everything else. That wouldn't call them do-it-all kites by any means, Personally, I think they're really fun for jumping old school tricks. They have a super raw feel. The modern ones relaunch really easy, and I don't even think they're that far of a cry from the crossover kites anymore, but that's a whole nother point. So moving on to the big air rider, this is where things get a little more complicated because it depends on how you define big air. So if we're talking competition level, you're hucking big loops, you're riding hard, crossover kite, even sea kite is still king for this category. Now, if you just want to get out, you want the most automatic feel on the water, you don't really want to do a lot of work, you just want the kite to rip you up, get a good woo score, float, be lofty, roll around, have some fun, and just stay in the air as long as possible. Well, now the do-it-all kites, or even the big air specific kites, are something that you can consider looking at. So the big air kites, they're kind of an interesting hybrid between the freestyle kite and the do-it-all kite because, for example, like the North Orbit, it's a really, really lofty kite, but it's also good at looping, and it doesn't really bother with touching on that freestyle side of things. So I guess the point I'm making is, if you're a more experienced rider, take a look at the full range of the brand and then see what that kite will excel at. So if you hop on any kite, you can actually see they'll have a listing of like, this kite is like a 6 out of 10 on the waves, or this kite's a 10 out of 10 for big air, this kite's a 6 out of 7 for freestyle, etc. And you would be surprised at how accurate these things are. I mean, these guys are out there testing with their teams. Most brands have some pretty phenomenal riders, and they actually articulate pretty honestly what a kite's good at and what it's not good at if you just look at the rankings on the website. So just wrapping this video up, my whole point here is almost all kites are do-it-all kites at this point. So if you have a specialty that you like, a certain discipline that really excites you and amps you up on riding, you would be amazed at how significantly better the performance is when you go from an all-around kite to a slightly specialized, but truth be told, still kind of do-it-all kite. So this is just my 2 cents. You can chime in, let me know your thoughts. If you guys found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll catch you next time.